Hello, everyone.
Good.
We are talking today with one of my absolute favorite state reps in the entire country, the great Bob Morgan of Illinois. And boy, we sure have a lot of things to talk about. Seems like there's a lot of things that are going on just every single day nowadays, huh?
Yeah, whenever we catch up, it's only like 17 things that we have to talk about. So we'll see how much we can get to, but it's so good to see you.
We'll see how much we can get to. I know it feels like so much has changed. I think the first time we met, it was during Joe Biden's presidency. Everything seemed great. We were passing the American Rescue Plan. It was my 21st birthday. We were at a conference. It was my 21st birthday.
Yeah.
And here we are. I'm on the brink. End of this year, I'll turn 23, and oh my God, how things have just gotten so much worse. So let's talk about some good things for once.
Yeah.
You have the great honor and privilege of being a state rep in Illinois, which has a phenomenal governor in JD Pritzker. Y'all have been able to do a lot of really great things, and I wanted to talk to you because one bill in particular that I caught wind of. I didn't even know it was your bill. I posted about it on Instagram, and you messaged me about it. The ban on AI for therapy and therapists in the state of Illinois. And I have to tell you, when I saw this, I was like, "Ooh, I really need to look into this because I use ChatGPT all the time, all the time." And I'll use it to check like I'm having this symptom and this is how I feel. Like,
Right.
what does that mean? Or I'm taking this medication and this one. What does that mean? Because I don't want to call the doctor. And so when I
That's
saw this,
right.
I was like, I should look into this. So, tell me a little bit about this bill. About why you thought it was so important to put it up and start handling business.
Yeah, I've been worried about AI in healthcare for a while. I had started to focus a couple years ago on AI and health insurance because I started to really get concerned and convinced that insurance companies were using AI to just raise our rates and discriminate in ways that we are kind of blind to. It was happening in this black box. And so I really started doing the full deep dive and going down that rabbit hole of how is AI being used to deny your healthcare. And there's a lot of good stuff in AI and healthcare. There's a lot of innovation and technology and research and all these things that generally speaking can be really, really positive. And government historically is just so slow to catch up to technology. And about 9 months ago, I got a call from the Social Worker Association in Illinois. And they said, Bob, we saw you're paying attention to AI in healthcare. What do you know about AI in therapy? And I said, well, tell me more. And what they started to hear about was that AI was increasingly being used for therapy, mental health, behavioral health,
Hmm.
and that it was causing some really concerning stuff and giving some really, really scary advice. And we started to look into it. And sure enough, as we started working on it just this spring, it became really, really common to see these stories about AI sometimes helping, but more often really giving scary advice to people as therapy bots. And that's what the law goes after. Make sure that, if you're really struggling, you have a mental health issue, we want to make sure you're getting to a professional who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And but as I was prepping for this interview, I started looking into it a little bit more myself. And I know the Harvard School of Public Health, they have research they did that showed that AI was giving really harmful information about eating disorders and was giving people bad advice about that. And then Stanford did a similar experience that showed AI bots were actually having a bias towards some conditions compared to other conditions that specifically were tied to mental health. So I mean, it sounds like this is a serious issue. So what exactly is the mechanism of how this bill would be enforced? Like this
Yeah.
isn't something like me, Olivia Juliana. I'm having problems with my mental health. I get on my phone to talk to my chatbot. Like that's not happening here. This is a different enforcement mechanism, correct?
Yeah, so this is in some ways the easiest way to think about this is if you are looking for a surgeon and somebody pops up on the corner from your house and says, I'm a surgeon and I'm going to do your surgery for 10% of the cost and it's going to be great. And it turns out that person is not a surgeon at all and is actually somebody who used to work in a bagel shop. And I'm going to say that because I used to work in a bagel shop. So,
Mhm.
if you are going to somebody for a medical issue and they're not trained, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, we've always kind of regulated that. So this is really in some ways not new. What's different is that AI is becoming so ubiquitous in everything that we see and do that people are turning to it for all sorts of things. And in this case, you're talking about people who are really vulnerable. You mentioned eating disorders. There are people with substance abuse disorders. There's research that came out a couple months ago about somebody who had drug addiction and went to AI and looked for some help in a crisis, and AI encouraged that person to use more drugs, right? And so
Wow.
these are some scary situations and always garbage in, garbage out. But ultimately, the states are going to step in on situations like this to make sure you have a healthcare professional that knows what they're doing.
Wow. I hear that. I hear these things about helping expand access to healthcare and, being here in Texas, it's hard for me to imagine those kinds of things. What do you think that there's room I should say, do you think there's bipartisan room on a federal level to try to get some legislation like this passed? Is there any appetite? Were there Republicans in the state legislature that were willing to work with you on this?
Yeah, Illinois passed this bill in a bipartisan way. In fact, I think it was almost unanimous in both chambers. So we had a bipartisan bill here. Of course, we all know kind of what happened over the last couple of months where the Trump administration tried to say states cannot regulate AI at
Mm-hmm.
all for 10 years, right? Imagine where we're going to be
Wow.
light years from now in 10 years. And the idea that we're just going to say, trust us, whatever AI company fill in the blank, right? I don't trust them. They're making business
Hmm.
decisions based on profit, not what's healthy, what's going to be safe. I saw Terminator movies. I know where this goes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like we've got to step in at sometimes criminal issues, right? We're seeing a lot of deep fake porn stuff. We're seeing a lot of criminal
Yeah.
abuse, child abuse type stuff. These are things that the states have to step in on. And I think that there's room for that. I think, at least in Illinois, we're seeing bipartisan agreement on some of these issues. And I hope that that continues.
Yeah. Especially you're so right about AI really is just getting so integrated into every facet of society. It didn't really start picking up until after I graduated high school. I was entering college. But when I was on Snapchat is when they kind of started integrating AI into it. So now there's like a chat bot on every person's Snapchat that you can talk to. And I remember seeing TikToks and social media posts about impressionable people who were saying that
Yeah.
they were falling in love with these chatbots because they
Right.
were responding like a human. And so I think you're 100% right that there has to be concerted, targeted regulation when it comes to this, not just to protect people who are in mental health crises, but specifically to protect young people who are now growing up with this technology. So
Right.
I think it's really promising to see that.
Well, and like you said, I mean, we're not making AI go away. It's never going to
Yeah.
happen. You're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. But what we can do is try and put regulations around it and just some borders of like, look, this area of calming therapy is fine, right? But if you're starting to prescribe, you're starting to treat people in a mental health crisis and tell people and act as an AI bot, but act as if you're a therapist, right? That's when you're getting into troubling territory. If you don't know that you're talking to a bot as opposed to a licensed social worker or a clinical psychologist or whatever, right? These are things that worry me as a regulator, legislator, as just a person, as somebody who has young kids who are more and more on social media, turning to AI and very, very familiar. They're more familiar with AI than any of the movies I watched when I grew up. These
Yeah.
are these are just it's not going to go away. And so we have to be honest about that stuff.
Yeah. I want to turn to a topic that is top of mind, I think, for pretty much every Democrat that's paying attention to the news in the country right now. The Texas Democrat left the state, broke quorum, went to Illinois. Just before we record this interview, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, just finished giving his press conference about his plan to send this issue to the voters of California. I really haven't seen a lot of perspective from Illinois lawmakers about this because Illinois is at the top of the conversation as well. I know many of the lawmakers that went to Illinois and broke quorum who did press conferences with JD Pritzker. Did you have a chance to talk to any of them that were there, interact with any of them?
Yeah, I have a couple friends who are from the Texas delegation that are here. Won't divulge any of the specific conversations, but definitely, Illinois is a welcoming place in general. But I'm impressed as just a fellow colleague legislator. If I had to leave my family and my state and pick up and move to a different state just to preserve democracy, how do you not
Mhm.
applaud that? How do you not take that seriously? And this whole issue, so many of the things that we're facing are just we're just becoming normalized, right? But the idea that we're going to start redistricting every year or two for partisan advantage is insane to me. The idea that we're going to just pick a random date that's going to benefit my political party or your political party and gerrymander our state to get a couple extra congressional districts. What kind of democracy is that? That's insane. And that's clearly what's happening in Texas. And I'm glad to see the Democrats in Texas step up and really say, we're not going to tolerate that. We're going to take extreme measures to make sure we're protecting democracy. And Illinois and California, New York, and other states are trying to do the same.
I know California has an independent redistricting committee that it's part of the reason why this issue of redistricting is going to have to go back to the voters in that state. What does being part of this fight and this conversation look like for Illinois? In Illinois, what is the mechanism for if you were to redistrict within the next year to counteract what's happening in Texas and potentially in other states like Missouri and South Carolina? What would that look like for the state of Illinois?
Yeah, I'll echo what our great governor, JB Pritzker, said. Everything's on the table when we're talking
Hmm.
about whether our democracy is going to survive. We have a situation that's a little bit different than California, as an example. We have 17 members of Congress and three are Republicans, right? So, in terms of what mechanisms exist for Illinois, we just started collecting petitions about a week ago. And so we're already focusing on the 2026 election. So I think Illinois is looking at everything and anything we can do. And yet I just met with a couple days ago with some friends who are Missouri Democratic legislators, and they are just scared to death about what the
Yeah.
Missouri legislature is going to do because they can't break quorum. They don't have the power to stop Missouri from gerrymandering away one of their two Democrats. They only have two Democrats in the whole state of Missouri, and they're looking like they're going to do it. It's just this wild time. I never would have dreamed even 6 months ago as we started this new
Yeah.
horrible Trump administration. This is insane stuff, and we can't normalize it.
Yeah, yeah, and I like to take the opportunity to remind everyone, particularly if there are any Republicans watching, which I highly doubt, in 2021, the first piece of legislation that was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives by the Democrat trifecta was the For the People Act, which would ban partisan gerrymandering. So that's kind of where I'm at in this conversation of, we tried to get rid of it, we tried to make this fair, and now once again, Texas, my home fortunately but unfortunately, is the breeding ground for these kinds of attacks. These attacks again. I mean, what does this look like for you as a lawmaker? I know in Texas things are a little bit different for us. We have legislative sessions every other year, but you guys are a lot more, I think, hands-on and a little bit more
Yeah.
around the clock than we are here. Like, has there been conversations among you and your colleagues about other legislation related to protecting democracy, protecting districts, and things like that? What conversations have been having between y'all?
Yeah, since January 20th, it's certainly been nonstop. We've been focusing on everything from uh, all the Medicaid cuts and all the healthcare cuts. I spent a lot of time. It's just my area of focus anyway. So we spent a lot of time preparing to play defense about the bad and worst decisions and ideas that were coming out of DC. We spent a lot of time talking about higher ed costs, cuts, disability cuts, the way they've turned the Office of Civil Rights into an attack on civil rights, right? So Illinois, as a state, we got to step up. So our enforcement mechanisms have to stand in the place of all the things the federal government isn't doing. We are dealing with community violence interruption, and the feds have cut over and over and over the last couple of months all of that funding. It's all gone. So they're talking about, making sure they're getting rid of crime, and then they're cutting violence interruption, which is the number one way to cut crime. And so Illinois has to step in, both at the state and local level. And it's like that all the time. It's just whack-a-mole. Again, a lot of healthcare stuff. The legislation they passed on banning AI therapy bots, that passed and wasn't yet signed by the governor when the Trump administration tried to insert this provision to ban any AI regulation, right? So that was all in within a month we were dealing with that. And so it's nonstop, just trying to play defense to protect everything like reproductive rights, making sure we're protecting gender affirming care, trying to protect our disability, special education funding, all of this stuff. That's where we're at.
Yeah. I can't help but point out, I feel like so often when we talk about the attacks from the Trump administration, I think people kind of have this mentality that, well, blue states will be okay. Like they're concerned with their people. But, for someone like me, oftentimes now I find myself more and more in the position of looking to these blue states and looking to these Democratic governors and state legislators, praying and hoping, dear God, let them do this because I know we can't do it here in Texas. So from this Texas Democrat to you, I appreciate everything that you're doing to try to counteract the worst aspects of the Trump administration. I know, especially as it relates to reproductive health care, that Illinois has been a place of hope and survival for so many Texans who have had to leave the state. It seems more and more there's a pattern here of every time Texas people need help with something, I think that they continue to find themselves in the state of Illinois. I know
Yeah,
we have a
you are
mutual
welcome.
friend.
I've been encouraging you to come move here. So
I see I have my CM Punk shirt on. I
I
wore it
know.
because I knew I'd be talking to someone from Illinois. I know our mutual friend Ethan would love it if I moved to Chicago.
Yes.
Um, Unfortunately, we got to stay here and we got to do the
No, you
work.
got to
Someone's
fight
got
the
to do
fight.
it.
You got to fight the fight. And that to me is the real question. Where's this end? And if we continue down this path where a state like Illinois, where we are a net exporter of our federal tax dollars, we're putting more into the federal government than we are getting back. And that was
Yeah.
before the Trump administration. So now Trump wants to save more money and keep more money from Illinois. So how are we going to keep dealing with that? Texas sending, to your point, so many people coming to Illinois for reproductive health care. Should Texas be paying a tax that goes to Illinois? Right. And of course that's not something Texas is ever going to allow. But where are we going with this 50 state experiment that we have? And we're increasingly just like two totally different countries.
Well, my great hope is that where we're going is, come 2028, we will be electing someone who shares our values for democracy and freedom and I know, the basic outlines in the Constitution, and hopefully we'll be able to start to rebuild some of these things. But I look forward to rebuilding and continuing on this great experiment alongside you, my dear friend,
Yeah.
Representative Bob Morgan. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Always. And I'm not going to stop trying to encourage you to move here, but
Oh
for
my
all your
gosh.
listeners, like let Illinois know what we can do better, especially if you live in a red state and you need help. We're here for it and we're here for you.